Welcome to the live stream. If you guys have any writing questions on writing or storytelling, feel free to drop them in the comments. How do you start world building for your story? The way I like to think about starting world building is there's obviously so many different things you could start with. You could start with the government. You could start with the magic system. You could start with some of the settings, some of the characters. And there's so many places to start that it can be kind of overwhelming. But so what you need to do then is to decide semi-arbitrarily where you're going to start, because you need to get a handhold somewhere in this world, because if you keep looking at it too broadly with all these different options, you'll never dig in. So you need to find a point of attack. So figure out, like, what is something you do know about this world that you're writing about? Is it something about your character's upbringing that you know? Is it, do you know certain things about the magic system you want to have in there? Do you know what if it's going to be like a monarchy or an oligarchy, if you have like governments in there? And once you know that one thing, start digging into that one thing. So if it's a magic system, it's like, oh, well, I want a magic system where people can talk to animals. Then say, okay, cool, they can talk to animals. What impact does that have on society? Do animals have rights in a way that they wouldn't otherwise, because we can always see their thoughts? Are more people vegetarian? Or are animals really, do we have pets anymore? Or are they more like companions? Are the animals more intelligent or less intelligent or equally intelligent to the animals we have in the real world? And so you see how we kind of have this trickle down effect of, like, we find a handhold and then we just keep diving in, and then it creates implications for the world. And so that's what I recommend when you're trying to get started with world building, is choose some point of attack. It can be any point of attack, whatever's most interesting to you or what you already have kind of vaguely figured out, and then start making decisions and keep following those threads to slowly but surely build your world out. Can you give an example of showing and not telling? I struggle with this a lot. Sure. I think I have an example in my head from a previous video. So let's say Tommy's your main character, and he's sad that his older brother died. Telling would be Tommy was standing on his own looking sad, or Tommy felt sad. That's telling. You're telling us what his emotion is. Tommy is sad. That's telling. Tommy felt sad. Showing would be describing Tommy sitting off on his own in the treehouse he and his brother built together after his brother died. He's out there alone, and he's got his brother's old twins ball cap pulled down low over his eyes, and he's just sitting out there. You see that, and you can feel Tommy's sadness. We're not telling you. The writer's not telling you Tommy is sad. The writer is showing you a person in pain, a person who's hurting. And so that's what it means to show instead of tell. How do you know whether a story idea is a good one to put all your time and energy into? If it gets you really, really excited about the story, like if you have a story idea that gets you excited and it sounds fun to you and it gets you excited to write, that is the best idea to invest in. Because the thing is, I think we put too much emphasis on the value of the story ideas in our heads, because we think, oh, we got that 1 in a million idea, or sometimes we'll think, oh, this idea is perfect, this is going to be huge, or this idea is not good, I can't give it the time because I really like it, but it's not really going to be a big blockbustery kind of a story idea. And we put too much thought into the idea itself, the initial seed, because we think it's a story, but it's not. What you have in your head, the idea, all it is a seed of the story that you have to plant and you have to nurture and see it all the way through. There's no predicting how it will turn out, because it's just a starting point. It is so far from what the final product will actually be. And so what's the best way to decide which ideas are worth your time? Whichever ones you are most excited about, whichever ones inspire you the most, because those are the ones you're going to put the most effort into and bring the most excitement to. The best stories are ones written by people who are excited and happy and passionate about them. Those are the ones that will be most likely to succeed and click with people, because you will be so excited about it and you will be so passionate about it. So that's what I recommend always, is don't worry too much about the idea in terms of, oh, will this resonate with people or this or that? Like, which ones are you most excited to write about? Because if you're really excited about it, I guarantee someone out there is also going to be excited to read about it. And the best stories you write are going to be the ones you're excited about. So go down that route. What genre did you think was not for you, but you read one book from it and you loved it? This isn't really a genre, but I always have hated whenever someone said a story was Kafka-esque. I kind of avoided it. I was like, it's not really my thing. I like more straightforward. Like, it seems a little pretentious to me. I'm not a big fan of it. And so I never read Kafka himself for the longest time. But then I was like, just read the Metamorphosis and Other Stories collection you have. Just read it, give it a shot. I did. I loved it. I loved the Metamorphosis and Kafka's Other Stories. And there's actually part of a beginning of a novel he never finished in there. And I'm so mad that he never got to finish it because I need to read more Kafka because actually I was surprised. I thought I would hate him. Loved him. Absolutely loved him. And didn't feel pretentious at all. I think sometimes stories that are described as Kafka-esque can be a little pretentious, but yeah. Is it a bad idea to mix genres? I'm scared of mixing too much of them, or is it a good idea to do? It is absolutely not bad to mix genres. In fact, that's how you keep genres fresh. That's how you create stories that feel unique, even if they're taking little pieces from all these different places. Because if everyone only ever wrote science fiction as science fiction had always been written, it would be boring. It's interesting when you bring in other influences. A great example of this in terms of films are superhero films of the past decade. I'm not the first person to make this observation. In fact, I've taken this from other film analysis, like YouTubers and stuff. Though I'm afraid I don't remember whom I first heard it from. But if you look at the Dark Knight trilogy by Christopher Nolan, those films have more in common genre-wise with crime films than they do with superhero films. That's pulling from other genres. Likewise, Logan, the Wolverine movie, has much more in common with westerns than your standard superhero genre movie. And so those are films that are bringing new inspiration and freshening up the superhero genre by pulling in aspects of other genres. And so mixing genres is absolutely a great thing to do. And truthfully, there's been so much mixing of genres already that like you'll probably find a place for your book. For example, if you're like, I want to mix fantasy and sci-fi, Slipstream already exists. There's a bunch of it. Those type of books are already all in the same fantasy sci-fi section anyway. And if you want to blend it a little bit with paranormal romance and stuff like that, like truthfully, yeah, you can blend and mix anything you want. Just whatever inspires you. How to write if I'm tired after work. What I recommend because I've been there, like, you're tired at the end of the day, you don't want to sit down, you don't want to write, and so it just seems so insurmountable that you're just not going to do it. And so there are two things I recommend to help you get past that kind of fatigue. Commit to a schedule, and then also commit to a small minimum word count. So what you want to do is, one, be like, every day at this time in the evening, I'm going to write. If it's every day or just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever schedule you want, commit to those times, and then set for yourself a very reasonable barrier that you know you'll be able to hit. So for example, my favorite is to always commit to at least writing one sentence every day. And what this does is it's a very small barrier that gets you seated down at your computer. You open up the Word document, and then you start writing, and you write one sentence. And that is all you have to do. But then you get to decide, do I continue or do I stop? You'll be there at the computer desk, you will have the Word document open, you'll already have started, and it's so much easier to get yourself to keep going than it would have ever been to get yourself started in the first place. So that's what I try to recommend to get over feelings of fatigue or barriers like that, is to make writing super easy. Commit to it every day if you can, or specific days of the week, and then just give yourself that very small barrier to get you seated in front of the computer and started. Because if you can get yourself started, even if it's just a minimum of one sentence, you're going to be much more likely to keep writing and keep going, even when you're tired. What do you do when a character doesn't have enough agency? You need to more thoroughly... because a character doesn't have agency when their choices don't matter. And so to give a character agency, you need to start having them take actions that influence the plot. And so if that means if you're reading your story and you're like trying to add more agency to your character, but the plot moves all on its own, that means you have to rewrite the plot a little bit. You have to have your character do things that influence the course of the story. That's what gives them agency. And that's good because characters with agency are more fascinating. They're more interesting to read a lot of the time, because they are integral to the plot. They are not only affected and grown by the plot, they make the plot happen, which is always a very exciting and fascinating to watch. Doesn't mean passive characters can't. It doesn't mean passive characters don't have a place. They absolutely do. But Yeah, that's how you add agency. Have you read any translated books? I know some people think a lot is lost in translation. I have. In fact, I mentioned this. Sorry, dropped the book. I mentioned this earlier. It's fascinating. Jhumpa Lahiri wrote all of her books and short stories in English, but then she fell in love with the Italian language. So she moved to Italy. I don't know if she's still there, but she started writing in Italian and learning more and more about the Italian language and getting better at it. And what's interesting is she wrote this entire memoir in Italian. And actually, on this side, it's in English. On this side, it's in Italian. Wrong. Other way around. This side is Italian. This side is English. And she didn't translate the English. She only wrote the Italian half. And then they paid someone else to translate it for her. So it's really fascinating, actually. That's why translation itself is an art form. Like in my MFA, there actually was a class on poetry translation, because what you basically have to do is do your best to recreate the effect the writer was making in their own language in English, or whatever language you're translating it to. And the connotations aren't always the same. There's also interesting stories about, like, I wish I knew the specific example, but I know Neil Gaiman was actually involved in the translations for the film Princess Mononoke from Studio Ghibli. And there were certain, like, types of spirits and things they couldn't literally translate over because we don't have an equivalent in Western society. And so they just did something similar that would have as close to of a connotation as was originally in the film. And so translation is definitely an art. Things are lost, but I like to see them more as a creative collaboration. Like, for example, just because we don't have the exact original meaning of the creator, if it's a good translator, they might be kind of very slightly remixing it for a different culture in an important way. And so I don't necessarily see it in too negative of a light unless the translator is bad at their job. Do you have any tips on how to write better? There are a lot of ways you can write better. I mean, generally speaking, it's very common advice, but if you read a lot and write a lot, that's the best ways to improve as a writer, because what happens with reading is it shows you, this is why reading is so important, why you can't just skip reading if you want to be a good writer. It's because when you read other people's works, you get to see demonstrations and different iterations of how stories can be told in the written word. You get exposed to different styles of writing, which can help inspire you. You get exposed to different techniques, different ideas. So, like, whenever you don't know how to solve a problem in your own work, if you've read enough books, you can often pull from other authors how they solve those problems, use them as inspiration. And so that's why reading is so important for improving. And then obviously writing is also important because you have to practice it. You have to put some stuff into, give it a shot, try it in different contexts, because every story is unique. And so it becomes a lot of improvisation that you have to do. But yeah, reading and writing are the best ways to improve. Those are the main broad tips. But in terms of anything more specific, really kind of depends on what you want to get better at. So I'll give you one more that's more specific advice. If there's a particular writing skill that you want to improve, what I recommend doing, actually no, this will be better. I haven't posted a video about this in a long time, but my old trumpet instructor from college used to have this advice where we'd be sitting down for one of our private lessons, and he was very strict about practicing and stuff like that, and really committing yourself to fixing mistakes. And so one of his favorite phrases of all time was, I would be playing a solo for him, and I would make a mistake that I'd fixed, but I used to be a problem, but I would make that same mistake again. So I'd be playing through the solo, and I'd make a mistake I'd made before, and he told me in the past to fix it. And what would happen is he would stop me, and he'd be like, Michael, I hate to mow the same grass twice. And that's what he would say when I made a mistake he'd already told me to fix. And he was very hard on us and very much adamant about us not making the same mistake over and over again. Because what happens when you make a mistake in music, in writing, or anything is the first time it happens, whatever. Second time it happens, you start forming a habit, and a bad habit is what it becomes. And so in my trumpet, this became me. Every time I played this sequence of notes wrong, I was creating a habit of playing it incorrectly. And then when I go to perform, I'd be under pressure. And then what happens when you're under pressure is your natural habits come out. And so you would play it incorrectly because that's the habit you've developed. And so that's why it's important to nip habits in the bud. So if you want to improve really quickly, I actually applied this over to my fiction writing when I went to my graduate and went to my MFA. Was every time we do a workshop, I would look at my short stories, feedback. I'd write my short story, I'd give feedback or get feedback from my workshop people, and I would look at it all and I would find one thing that they recommended I change, or rather look for one thing I wanted to see change based on their feedback. And the next time I wrote a story, I told myself that this is the one thing you cannot do again. You can make any amount of new mistakes as you want to, but focus all your energy on avoiding this type of mistake again. And what that did was it helped me break habits one by one more quickly. And I ended up improving very quickly, according to my professors, and it worked really well for me. And so for me, the big thing I remember from my first couple my first short story in the workshop was I was told that my main characters were very passive. They were like windows to the story rather than participants in the story. And so with my next story, I was like, you have to have an active main character. You can't keep writing these, because I noticed all my other stories for like the past couple of years, all of them were very passive. And that was a habit I developed. So next time I wrote a story, I focused all my energy on writing a more active main character. And what happened was I wrote that story and they weren't as active as they could be, but they were more active than they had been before. And so the next time I was like, doubling down. I was like, I want them more active. So I kept pushing that one thing until that became something, until a new habit formed. No longer was my habit writing passive characters. My natural inclination then became to write active characters, which is good. And so that's kind of a way to improve very quickly on top of the general reading and writing advice is focus on what you want to change or improve in your writing and replace bad habits with good habits. So the bad habit for me was passive characters all the time, which, by the way, a passive main character can work in the right context. The problem was I was using them in every context, and I wasn't writing stories where it worked very well. And so I took that bad habit and I replaced it with a better habit, which is to naturally write more active characters. And now I don't have to think about it that much. It comes more naturally to me because I've made that a habit through focusing on that thing so much over the years. And so what I'd recommend to you is, if you want to improve more quickly, identify one thing after you've written a story, gotten feedback, and you can see a pattern in your writing you don't like. Identify that one thing you want to see change, and then commit all your energy towards fixing it, replacing that bad habit with something better the next time you write a story. But all right, everybody, I'm going to have to head off now. Thank you all for joining me for this live stream. I do this every Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Time. So if you're able to stop on next time, it'll be great to see you. If not, hope you have a good week. Thank you for jumping on, everybody.